Hi, welcome to episode 408 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. And I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns and knitting patterns. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, January 16th, and we are celebrating the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, a day of remembrance. And so I am mostly working and keeping as normal here on Mondays. Lots to do, lots to craft, lots to show and share. I hope that you have had a good week. Last week was all over crazy, and I'm still not ready to talk about all of it yet, but I will soon, I promise. I did get quite a bit of crafting done, and so I have lots of good things to show you. So let's go right to what I'm drinking. Today I am actually drinking coffee, I know, and I am drinking the Roastery. It is French caramel cream, and it is lovely. It is one of my favorite coffees, and I am drinking it in my Halloween Hello Kitty mug because it's the one I saw first, and we can have Halloween year-round, right? So that is keeping me going this afternoon. It is about 3 o'clock here. I'm coming to you from just outside Kansas City. It has been a little bit warmer and sunnier for the last few days, which is nice. Yesterday it got up to 56, although it was windy, so it was still pretty chilly. So let's dig right in. I have a couple finished objects to show you. The first finished object I have to show you is the baby surprise jacket, and I was knitting this out of Zen Yarn Garden. I'm looking to see, I don't think I have a tag, but this is Zen Yarn Garden Superfine DK, which is 100% superwash merino. This is a sample for them, and it is the baby surprise jacket by the great Elizabeth Zimmerman. I am using the pattern written in The Opinionated Knitter, but if you would like to purchase a copy of the pattern and do not own Elizabeth Zimmerman's books or do not want to purchase them, I believe you can get a line-by-line pattern from Schoolhouse Press, which is now run by Meg Swanson, who is Elizabeth Zimmerman's daughter. There is more information and links on Ravelry if you were able to use that, and I put a link to, I believe, the Schoolhouse Press pattern on my blog. Just as a reminder, none of my blog links go to Ravelry because I know that it is not safe for everyone to use. So I will link to patterns when able, when they are available off Ravelry, and otherwise I will just put the pattern name and the designer, and if you can use Ravelry, you can take that and Google for, or go onto Ravelry and use that information. So the yarn that I am using is one of the Art Walk colorways dyed by Zen Yarn Garden. They take a painting by a great artist and translate it to yarn, and this one is called The Painted Chair, and I cannot remember who the artist is, but I will add that in the show notes. And the colorways are, it's a pink chair on a deck, and so this is the pink chair with gray and yellow, and it is really kind of fun, and it's actually perfect for a baby surprise jacket because it's bright and colorful and cheerful. And this is what I have done. So I don't have any buttons yet, but this is the finished baby surprise jacket. This is a little garter stitch jacket. It is knit all in one piece. There is a small section where you only work on a certain number of stitches, but there's no real like short rows or anything like that. You are literally casting on, increasing a little bit, decreasing a little bit, and when you are all done, kind of like origami, the piece folds up and you have two seams right up here at the top of the shoulders and sleeve, and then you are set. So that is the jacket. My guess is I used a DK weight yarn, and the request was that I use size 5 needles to get approximate gauge, and I actually went down to US 4s. That's because I am a loose knitter and I always go down a needle size, and my guess is this is probably more toddler sized than it is baby sized. Maybe a year, but I don't know. I guess I'm not great on baby sizes. The thing about a baby surprise jacket is if you knit one right around the time the baby is born, it will fit at some point. So this is one of those patterns where Elizabeth Zimmerman is kind of free and loose with the instructions, and she says use some baby wool and some needles, and maybe you want a gauge of about this, but the truth is the pattern works kind of in any yarn and any gauge, and that will just affect the size of it, and so then you can give it. This is a favorite baby gift of mine to give because some babies, it doesn't matter whether your baby is on the larger side or the smaller size. Like I said, it will fit at some point. It might fit when they're a few months old. It might fit when they're a year old, but that is kind of fun. So that one is done, and I need to take some photographs and definitely find some buttons for that, and that sample is done. So I will be showing you a little bit later a new sample that I will be casting on. I am still on my crazy hat kick, using up my leftovers, and I'm still in the blues bag. So this week I knit a pattern called Nordic Hat by Anne Mizoguchi. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. I have not checked yet to see if it is available elsewhere. Anne has 3 patterns on Ravelry. One is the Nordic hat, one is a herringbone hat, and one is... I can't remember what the other one is, but it is kind of diamond shapes. The Nordic hat is kind of a simple colorwork hat, and I actually had 2 balls that I had a little bit, basically like 2 half skeins, and so I went ahead and used it and knit a hat, and I went ahead and actually sewed my Hat Not Hate on there. So the background is still more of that sport weight from Cascade that I overdyed in like the berry blue Kool-Aid, and it gives it a little bit of a mottled effect. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the dark blue is. I had a decent amount of it. I still have a little bit of it left, but I thought it would make a really nice contrast for kind of a simple unisex hat, and I really, really like that, and I will be going back to this patterns. It is available, I think, in 2 sizes, and it calls for worsted weight, and I think I was using like a DK and maybe a sport, so it came out a little bit smaller, but that is fine because I am knitting these for kids anyway, so they don't have to be full adult sizes, and I think it calls to be knit on either 4s and 6s or 6s and 8s, and I knit it all on 6s. I could have gone down a little bit for the brim, but I decided I just didn't need to do that for this one, so I went ahead and knit it. And like I said, I put my Hat Not Hate tag on there. I actually have 2 more of those tags, so apparently I need to knit 2 more Hat Not Hate hats. I do have another blue hat in progress, although it actually might be the last one for now because I am getting down to the bottom of my scraps. So we'll just have to see. So that is one of the hats that I finished this week. So I also have a half-finished object, which I thought I would show you. Last week I showed you that I was working on socks, and I talked about wanting to knit rainbow socks for Knit the Rainbow, which is another charity. And I wanted to knit some DK weight socks and bought some yarn from my friend Christine, who is Treasure Goddess. And I bought, I think it's her Pirate DK, which I don't think she carries anymore. It is a Highland wool blend, and it has black running through certain sections, so it's kind of marled at certain points. It's a really interesting blend, and a lot of dyers carry it these days, both in fingering weight and in heavier weights, so you will likely see it around. But she did all of her colors on there, and my friend Treasure Goddess, who's Christine, is known for doing rainbow shades and like really just great saturated semi-solids, and so I decided that I wanted to buy a few from her and knit a rainbow of socks to then donate to Knit the Rainbow, which is a charity that supports LGBTQIA youth in New York currently, Chicago. I think they're going to be doing something in Minneapolis and a few other places around the country. They are growing. You can check it out. They are a 501c3, and I have knit for them before. And on an interview that I heard Austin Rivers, who is the founder, give, he said one of the most requested items at shelters and those who do not have a steady housing situation are socks. And so I realized that maybe I should be concentrating my efforts away from some of the hats. I do know Hat Not Hate, obviously looking for hats, and I have another charity I knit for looking for hats, but just creating some of those garments that are a little bit more complicated. I mean, lots of newer knitters can knit a basic hat, but socks can sometimes be daunting, and so I decided I should be creating some socks this year. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I finished my first sock, and I am really, really pleased. What I did is I took the entire skein, which was 250 yards, and I divided it in half using my ball winder and a kitchen scale, which I used to measure my fiber and various other things. And so I got 2 50-gram cakes that I then started knitting a sock from the toe up. And so the sock that I knit is it's David Schultz's Toe Up Sock Cookbook. It is basically a recipe, and the best thing about it is you start at the toe and you knit the toe, and then you can figure out your gauge from the toe and then calculate what you want to do for the rest of the pattern. So this is a toe-up sock with a gusset and heel flap, and I believe the only thing that I changed about his pattern is I believe he knits his heel flap straight, and I did a slip stitch heel flap because I think that's a little bit snugger around the back back of the heel, and that is kind of my favorite way to do that. But I was actually really pleased because I got a decent sized cuff, even though I knit a fairly long foot. For my numbers, you can see that this is a little bit big. I have a size small foot, and so these are small sock blockers. I knit this up kind of across between the medium and the large size. I used the numbers from Rye, which is a sock pattern from Tin Can Knits, and so I used those numbers to give me an approximate of how many stitches I would want in a DK or worsted weight on a sock for a medium to large size foot. I'm kind of erring a little bit larger because I know that as a size 6 foot, I am on the small side, and so I would like to knit some larger socks. And I really wasn't sure how much I was going to have left for the cuff, but I was pleased that I had a really decent amount for the cuff, and so now all that is left is to knit a second sock and match this, and I hope I can do that by the end of the month. But I was, like I said, very pleased at how it came out. You can see a lot of that, the sections where the black is, where it gives like a nice marled, it just gives a nice textured sock, which is kind of fun. So I'm going to do another one, and then I have a skein of orange, so I will move on to that in February, and my plan is to just keep knitting these throughout the year and see how many pairs of socks I can do for the donation. At a minimum, I would like to do 6, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, but maybe I'll try and do some indigo or pink or add a few other colors in there to expand the rainbow so I have a good selection that I can send next year. I will probably vary whether I knit small, medium, or large socks. And the foot on this one looks really long to me, but I'm hoping that it's going to be okay. I'm really bad, since I have really small feet and I always knit the smallest size, I'm really bad about like how wide around it should be corresponding to how long it should be. And so I tried to use Rye as my pattern template, and then I think I ended up with a little bit more in the heel gusset, so I think I might do just slightly shorter on the next sock. But, well, not the matching one for this one, but slightly shorter on the next pair of socks. So that is what's going on there. So let's talk about what I've been working on this week, what I have needle adjacent. So one of the things that I have been working on is I am still working on my blues, and I said I was about to the end of that. So I picked up another colorwork hat pattern. I don't have a lot to show you, and I don't have the information to show you yet. I will hopefully finish this one in the space of this week and then bring it back and show you, and I will bring all the details then. I will also put the details that I have in my knitting notes. So I have about a half a cake left of this bright blue. You've seen this now. This is the third hat I'm doing with this one. And I decided that I wanted to do a colorwork hat and use this up. And what I have here is I have a bag of, well, okay, I have one bigger scrap, but I have a bag of all kinds of bits and bobs. I think you can see all kinds of, whoops, one fell out, but all kinds of bits and bobs that are probably 5 to 20 yards. And so what I did is I found a, colorwork pattern and decided to knit it all in blues. So I'm using the turquoise, kind of this berry blue as my base color, and then I am starting to put in all different colors of blue. And I think you can see that I've got some different ones in there. I've got a real dark, and then kind of a royal, and then a little bit of a teal, and I'm now working on adding a little bit of gray in there. It's really hard to see, and part of the reason that I stopped was the other night I got a little bit off on my color work, and so I really need to go back and sit down and fix it, and I just decided that at that point my brain was shot and I was not going to do it anymore. This is a free colorwork hat pattern on Ravelry, and it calls for a variety of colors, none of which I'm using, but basically I tried to divide my blues into mediums, darks, lights, mediums, and darks, so that I could then do the sections of the hat as they were arranged in light, medium, and dark. So I don't think this is going to be like 100% successful in terms of, I don't think it's going to look as beautiful as a colorwork project could look were you using the colors that were recommended in the pattern or a wider palette than just blues. But given that I just have little bits and pieces left of a whole variety of blues, I think I'm going to use up most of them in this project, and that was really the point of this. After this, I will be almost all done with the blues. I have one other small cake. This one, I don't know what this is. I have one other half cake, and then I have a couple skeins of super bulky yarn, and or a couple little bits of super bulky yarn, and I don't have enough to make a bulky weight hat. So my plan on that is to throw those back in the bag and back in the box and pull out something new. I'll show you that in a minute, and start moving through new scraps. So that would be a total of 5 hats knit kind of at the end of December and in January out of my blue bucket. And so those will all go to Hat Not Hate, and then I will move on to some new colors and come up with some hats for another purpose. So that is what I will work on this week in terms of kind of free knitting, whatever else I'm doing on the side, feeding my hat kick, and when I get done with my hat kick, I'll put things away and pick it up the next time. But at least right now I'm enjoying figuring out hat patterns to use up my scraps. So, yeah. So next up on the needles, I need a new project because I finished my Zen Yarn Garden sample. So I am going to be working on a new shawl sample, and I have not really gotten into it yet. But the pattern that Zen Yarn Garden requested is, I think it's probably either Bejazzle or Bejazzle. It's B-J-A-Y-Z-L. And I can't remember who is the designer, but all of that will be in the show notes. And for this one, it is a shawl that is done in 2 weights of yarn. It's garter stitch. It has some really cool kind of meshy looking lace, and it is done in 2 weights of yarn, which is kind of very popular these days in terms of like using one that's like a thicker weight and one that's a thinner weight. And so I am using for this one, as determined by Zen Yarn Garden, I am using their Superfine DK, which is 100% Superfine Superwash Merino, in the Au Naturel colorway, so undyed. And then I am combining it with some fingering weight in some of their pooling skeins. Now, these skeins were designed to pool in certain projects. I don't know precisely what they will do in this project, but if you are interested in those fun planned pooling projects, these skeins were designed to be approximately half and half, or I think 60-40, so that you could knit either side of the skein in a pattern and work on pooling or yarn-led pooling patterns. Zen Yarn Garden has a variety of them, and they are fun. I have knit a couple of them. One of them includes the, I can't remember what the scarf name is. It is a scarf by Shayna Billow, and it basically uses like cross-hatched stitches when you get to a certain point in the yarn. So I believe the yarn I used for that was purple, and then it was like yellow with pink splotches, and the yellow with pink splotches or red splotches was the section where we did the cross-hatch pattern, and the rest of it was just knit in plain stockinette stitch. So these are kind of fun for that, but I'm going to be adding these to this shawl, so there will be a difference in textures between the thicker DK weight yarn and then the thinner fingering weight yarn. And these are, like I said, they are the Jump in the Pool series by Zen Yarn Garden. It is 3 skeins of 100 yards each. No, I'm sorry. It is 3 skeins of 200 yards each, so this is approximately 600 yards that I have here. It will be more than I need for the project, but they come in sets of 3. And as I said, it's a Jump in the Pool skeins, and this colorway is Shores. One of the things I will tell you about Zen Yarn Garden and about their Jump in the Pool skeins is they dye them based on inspiration, and then often they don't, well, they'll probably dye this one again because they'll put together kits, but in general they don't necessarily re-dye colors, so if you see one you like, you should order it because it will be limited edition and it may not be coming back exactly the same. So that is what I'm going to start on this week, and hopefully I will have a good amount to show you next week on what I'm doing. I think the pattern itself only calls for 600 or 700 yards of yarn, so I think that it should be a fairly quick knit, and I should be able to get that done in the next couple weeks. So the next thing that I will talk to you about is what I'm going to do when I'm done knitting blue hats. And I am going to start with a combination of 2 things. I have my pink hats, my pink scraps, which is tons and tons of all kinds of pink scraps, and I put this ball of neon yellow in there just for fun because I thought it would make a fun contrast. I mean, I think this would make a Dayglow Bright hat. I know it's blowing out the screen. It would make a Dayglow Bright hat, but that might be super, super fun. And then the other thing I pulled out was greens because I thought pink and green might go together, and so I might do some overlap between the 2. So my plan next is to work on pinks and greens, and maybe I'll have something to show you from that if I finish up this blues hat this week. So, quick sip of coffee, and then let's cover spinning, and then we'll be done. So, I finished my first spin of the new year. I realized this weekend that even though I finished it on Friday, no, I finished it on Sunday, yesterday, which was the 15th, this is the first skein that I have finished in the new year. And this one is really pretty. It is a Polworth silk from Kim Dye's yarn, and it is called Smooth Operator. And it is kind of neutrals, kind of like, well, I'm trying to think about this, kind of gold or wheat color. I mean, very kind of pale tan. And then it's got some eggplant and some red and some russet, and they all kind of fit together, making this kind of a, it reminds me of a lot of fall colors, kind of smoky. And I spun this in a fractal. It is not washed and finished yet, which is why you can see that it's still a little funky. It needs to be washed and have the twist set. But this should be between 350 and 400 yards, and it is absolutely luscious. It feels great against the skin. And I think this would be a fun shawl, or, I mean, you could certainly turn it into socks, although it is not superwash. But the silk will give it a lot of strength, and the Polworth is very kind of cushy and soft, and my guess is actually it will plump up a little bit when I wash it. So that will be up in the shop probably later this week if you are interested in that one. So one of the projects that I have been talking about, and I've been sort of alluding to it and then not doing it, and so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my chicken. So, some of you know that I work for the City Girl Farm, which is the home of the original chicken footstool. And they create basically art pieces. Technically, they can be used as footstools, but basically art pieces that are chickens. They are... So the inside is brass and wood, and then they are stuffed and or padded and covered in some kind of wool on the outside. Whether that is felted or knitted or a variety of other things is sort of to be determined, and they create these one-of-a-kind art pieces, and I have been working with them for several years now. And one of the things that I found out in the last year or so is that as I continue to work for them and the more I do for them, I get to sort of earn my own chicken. And so I have been thinking about what I want my chicken to be for a while now, and I decided that, so there are lots of steps in chicken making. There is the spinning of the yarn. There is the knitting of the yarn or felting of the yarn into something that will go on the outside of the chicken. There is kind of assembling the chicken and pinning it together. And then there is the stitching of the chicken. And I generally do not spin very much for them. I do a little bit, but generally we use more thick and thin art yarns, and that is not my forte in terms of spinning. I generally only spin for them when they want something that's a little bit thinner and a little bit... well, it's not super even, but a little bit more even, a little less art yarn. And then primarily the bulk of what I do is knit for them. And I have brought samples of the things that I have knit over time. So when I decided, when I was thinking about what kind of chicken I wanted for myself, I realized that what I really wanted to do was kind of a complicated pattern that we've done a few chickens for. It's kind of a pinstripe pattern, and that I wanted to do it with some of my own hand spun. And for those of you who have been with me for a while, I think I spun for my chicken this past Tour de Fleece in 2022. And I spun some really rich kind of autumny colors with golds and burgundies and reds and oranges and a little bit of black and blue in there. And I spun this really beautiful barber pole yarn that came out to be approximately a sport or worsted weight. And then I paired it with some yarn that I had in my stash that I had purchased from a small fiber farm, and it had a lot of vegetable matter in it, and it was not very soft. I found it quite itchy, and I didn't know what to do with it because I had spent a decent amount of money on this quantity of yarn. And then I decided that it would actually probably be perfect chicken yarn. So I decided that I would use that in kind of a neutral, natural color against my hand spun. And so I spun that up, and I immediately started knitting a sample of the feathers, and I didn't like it. I think part of the reason that I didn't like it was because I spin fairly thin. Well, okay. When you are creating knitting and when you are creating handspun yarns and knitting for garments that people are going to wear, most of the time you look for qualities like drapiness, like softness, like comfort, because you don't want to wear stiff cardboard garments. You don't want to wear garments that have no give and are kind of stiff in one position, and you don't necessarily want to wear while some people want to create harder wearing outer garments, like harder wearing sweaters and mittens and hats. A lot of us definitely prefer to wear softer feeling garments around our bodies, and a lot of times we choose to work with silk or tencel or something else that will give it some kind of drape. When working with chickens, it has been a real interesting experience for me because we are creating art pieces, but we are also creating pieces that are a little bit more like furniture. I don't know that many people that use their chicken footstool as a footstool, but think about the durability that you would want for an armchair or a couch or something where you want it to look, you want it to continue to look crisp and good. You don't want it to necessarily look like, we all have sweaters where the yarn is really, really soft and you end up having to depill it with a gleaner or something else because it gets all fuzzy under the armpit and the areas that have lots of wear. You don't really want your furniture to look like that because then it always looks a little bit shabby. And when we're creating these art pieces, we want them to be very structural. We want the feathers to have body. We don't want them to lay flat or be super drapey because mostly we want them to kind of evoke a actual chicken with stiffer feathers. So it's been kind of a learning experience for me, learning how to knit and how to create yarns that I wouldn't necessarily want to wear, but that I want to use to create a structural piece. And so after I spun that yarn, and I really love that yarn, but I just didn't love the way it looked, and it created, true to form, it created feathers that were really kind of floppy and droopy and thin, and I was just really not, the girls at the studio assured me that they could make it work, but I just was not feeling it. And so it sort of sat in a project bag for months and months and months. And at the end of 2022, I think I talked about this briefly, that I was going to spin something for a special project and I wasn't sure if it was going to work and I was going to wait to tell you. So this is where this is leading. Basically, I decided that I wanted to see what else I could create and if I could create something that was a little bit better suited. So I really love Adrienne Hello Yarns yarns, and from time to time what she does is she sells patchwork kits or bags of seconds, and these are just bits and bobs of fiber. Her seconds are really good quality fiber, but what it is when she dyes for club or she dyes a lot of a colorway, a lot of times after she finishes braiding it and packaging it, there's like this much left from one and this much left from another, and so they're all really good quality fiber, but they're little bits and bobs and they don't go together in kind of the full color repeat. So a lot of times she'll just sell them as bags of seconds and ends, and you can use them from there. And not that long ago, she put up an update of bags of seconds, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna buy another bag, and if I like what I can do with it, I'll use it for my chicken, and if I don't like what I can do with it, then I will just spin it completely for another sweater for myself or whatnot. And she sells them in 1 pound bags, so usually it's enough to do a decent sized project with. So back around the holidays, November, December, I decided to spin up to sample a little bit of that fiber, and I probably sampled about an ounce just because I wanted to see what I could do with it. And what I did is I spun some thicker singles, as you can see here, and then I felted the snot out of them. Now, when we talk about felting, we are talking about taking wool, and adding heat and agitation. And what you're trying to do is kind of rough up the follicles. You are trying to rough up the follicles on the hair so that they kind of seal off and protect the yarn. And so when you're knitting garments, that's not necessarily something you want to do, because we have all put a sweater in the dryer or put something knitted in the washer and dryer by accident, and it has gone through a warm cycle in the washer and being washed and getting agitated with all the other things, and then we've put it in the dryer and the heat has shrunk it up. So think about the texture that you get from that. Now, there are knitting projects where you do want to do that. For instance, I have made tons of felted slippers, but for the most part, it's not a goal. When you spin fibers, a lot of times you want them to be soft and supple and usable for other projects, but you can also do what's called felting them. And basically, when you wash your fibers, you wash it alternately in hot and cold water, and you provide a lot of vegetation. Some people use actually a plunger. I just used my hands and rubbed the yarn against itself, and I kind of went hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold 4 or 5 times until what I ended up with was something that looked kind of fuzzy, and the other word they use to refer to it sometimes is fold, but it's kind of fuzzy and felted. And it means that the texture of the yarn is not as soft as it could be, and it does feel a little bit hard in some places. But this, again, is more of a textural yarn that I was looking for to create a little bit stiffer an object and create something with a little more form. The colors on this are not as bright as the colors on the yarn that I previously spun, so I couldn't decide if this was kind of what I wanted, but it's got purples and pinks and greens and grays and a bunch of other colors in this ball. So this is about an ounce. I have no idea how many yards, and I decided to sit down on Saturday night and knit myself a test of chicken feathers. And so I have the natural colored, this is Shetland. I have the natural colored Shetland, and I decided to, it is like a sport to DK weight, and I decided again, since I was looking for a thicker, more structural piece, I decided to hold the natural doubled, and then I striped in my hand spun, and I'm going to show you what I got. Isn't that great? Now this is quite a bit more of what I was looking at for my chicken. I love the way the color sort of gradiates throughout here. I love the way that it's kind of a single color at a time on each feather, but then they all kind of look like they go together because they have come from the same source. I love that it kind of stands up on its own. I'm going to wash and block this, but I love that the feathers curl a little bit because that is exactly what makes chicken feathers so much fun. They have some life, they have some body, they don't just flop over on the chicken. So I think I have found what I would like to do. So my spinning project for the next week or two is to finish creating the singles. I'm going to spin up most of that bag and just try and create some of these lush singles and then fold them. And this week I'm going to knit as many more sets of feathers as I can get out of this little bit here. And I am on my way to having my chicken. Part of the reason that I went in such length in this description is, one, it needs a little bit of description because it's not a very typical knitting process. But the other thing that the reason I wanted to talk about it a little bit is because this is a project that I have kind of been stuck. I've had my wheels in the mud on this and not sure where to go and what to do with it for the last 6 months or so. And sometimes you try and put together a knitting project or another kind of project and your excitement fades or something about it isn't right and you just don't feel like knitting it. And I think it's really important to go back to those projects and either just rip them and free yourself from the obligation of knitting something that's no longer fun for you, or figuring out why it is no longer fun for you and trying to figure out how to make it better. In this case, I don't want to not make myself a chicken. I want to make myself a chicken with my own supplies, and because I spin and knit, I'm going to be the one to spin and knit it, and then the girls at the studio are going to help me in terms of like pinning it and sewing it together. But I would really like to have this as a project for this year. And many weeks I am working on, I basically work for them on commission, and they give me, well, not commission, piecework basically, and many weeks they give me materials to turn into feathers in a variety of ways so that they can make chickens to sell. So I am a contractor for them. But many weeks of the year, for some reason, something doesn't come together. Last week it was that the spinner hadn't finished up enough yarn for me, so I couldn't go pick up the new yarn for the new projects. So I have a week to myself because normally I go up there on Fridays. So now I have a week with no chicken in progress. And I decided that part of the way I'm going to get to my chicken being done, because I stay so busy with so many other projects, is during the weeks that I don't have chicken projects to be working on, I'm going to work on mine. So this this week until Friday, I'm going to work on mine, and that should get me most of the way through this ball, and then hopefully I will start spinning up some more so that I have this as a project on the side. This will be long term. I hope to finish it by the end of the year, just because I really would like to do that, but we'll just see how the year goes and where my crafting time is, and until then, I'll be working. So that got a little long at the end, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about what I'm up to. I hope you have had a wonderful weekend and are ready for a great week ahead. Stay healthy, stay happy. I hope your crafting mojo has returned. And as I always say, I will see you next time. Happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next week. Bye.